Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Oh, how do I sound?
No, I pressed the button
Actually,
just then, and now you did that O thing.
Oh, sorry. No, I actually hadn't really adjusted my microphone, but as long as you think I sound good, then I'm good.
No, you sound great. You sound great.
Okay to go.
You sound terrific.
I'm okay to go. Just like Jodie Foster in Contact. Okay to go.
I loved that movie. I also think that may have been Matthew McConaughey's best film. I don't think he's done anything better since. I wanted to be a reverend. I wanted to be a priest when I saw that movie because of him.
There's always Magic Mike,
which shows the depth of my devotion to the cloth. If I can be swayed by the coolness of Matthew McConaughey in Contact, you could tell it was a little bit fleeting dalliance with spirituality, but that was it.
No, you should do it. You should do it.
You think I should?
You should start the religion of Matthew McConaughey.
Because Jedi was taken, and Vulcan actually is a race.
All you need is bongo drums and drums and some weed.
Yeah.
And go sit on the beach. You're good.
Okay, so we got a couple of things to talk about. I have no trailers to talk about. I'm not bringing any trailers to the table tonight, but I do want to bring one movie that I think you know what I'm talking about. I have caught up on it. I know we need to talk about it just briefly, and then we can move on. Can we do it? Do you have any trailers?
I didn't know it first, and then you said that, and yes, we should.
Do you have trailers to talk about? Should we talk about them quickly? I haven't seen them, but go ahead.
No.
Spider-Man.
The Amazing
Spider-Man, yeah. Okay.
Which lives up to its name.
Wow.
Surprisingly.
I was really taken by surprise in this movie. And there are people who were apparently surprised in the negative way. I am surprised by that.
Yeah.
I really like this movie. And now that I've had some time to kind of decompress over it, I feel like I know why now, after a couple of days. But I really want to hear your perspective on this movie. What do you think?
I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I can't remember if we've talked about it, but I wasn't that thrilled about the fact that they were rebooting Spider-Man already. I mean, I'm a huge Spider-Man fan. I really enjoyed the first two of the Sam Raimi movies, and I just pretend the third one doesn't exist.
Which is not entirely fair, but go ahead.
It's not fair, but that's the way it's going to be. Okay, I know it exists, but I just don't like it. How's that?
That's marginally better, but not really. I mean, your phone it. I
really think it's a terrible film.
It's not a terrible. Oh, go on.
Anyway, I really enjoyed the first two Spider-Man movies. I really enjoyed everything about them. I thought they did a great job, made a lot of smart decisions, and I think it worked really, really well. When I found out that they were rebooting Spider-Man, and not just like, doing more of the franchise, i.e. just another Spider-Man tale, but an actual reboot.
The origin story. A new origin story.
All over again within, less than a decade from when the trilogy ended. In fact, I think a decade from when the first of the trilogy actually came out. It just seems silly. I'm like, seriously, we all know the story. So I went.
Here's the thing: it's not like this is just as a little parenthetical. It's not like this is a wholly new team. I mean, the same Avi Arad. I mean, it's the same Marvel production team that is behind the Amazing Spider-Man, as was behind the first three movies. Go.
Sure. Well, the Marvel guys. I mean, they're going to be involved no matter what. And I actually, that's a good question. I'm not sure if outside of the core Marvel team, if there were any other people crossing over from the first trilogy to this one.
Well, and that's what I meant. Is that core Marvel team making that the core Marvel team, which has let me count 17 godzillion characters at their behest to do with as they please, and they choose to reboot Spider-Man a decade after they'd rebooted Spider-Man. That's my thing.
It just seems silly, but then I heard that they had Mark Webb on to direct it. I'm like, okay, that's an interesting choice. He did 500 Days of Summer. I love 500 Days of Summer. I thought maybe there was something going on, and then I heard Andrew Garfield. I'm like, okay, that's an interesting choice. And then I heard about his whole thing at Comic-Con last year, and I'm like, that's pretty cool. I started falling in love with it, and then I saw the trailer, and I started falling out of love with it again. I'm like, it looks silly. I don't really like Andrew Garfield. That scene with him and the thief with the knife, it just even in the finished film, I think it's just a very silly scene. I just don't like it at all. And the lizard's face, favorite. I was just not thrilled with the lizard's face. But other than that, I saw the movie and I was just like, wow, everything else I thought they did so well. Gwen Stacy, Captain Stacy, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, Uncle Ben, Aunt May, the lizard. It's like they captured all the characters so well, and the way they retold the origin story, I thought was very interesting. I really liked the new take on Uncle Ben and the famous, with great power comes great responsibility, how they tweaked that a little bit. I liked that.
Yeah.
All of the stuff
they tweaked that. That was, I don't have the piece of the script in front of me, but the quote, you could tell, oh, okay, we're really going to try to jam with great power comes great responsibility, and we have to use all different words in a different order. Go. You know what I mean? Like,
but
really,
it
didn't. That was for me, that was the clumsiest part of the script, was him trying to outline Spider-Man's metaphorical dilemma, or philosophical dilemma in words.
I felt that was a lot stronger, and I felt the whole death of Uncle Ben was actually much more powerful in this version.
Yes, absolutely. That's the piece that I like. And so. You see the movie and you get to be blown away by the spectacle of it, because it's a spectacle, and they do a good job with the spectacle and the swinging, and I didn't mind the first person parts of it. I felt like they did that in a pretty integrated way. I didn't find it distracting as many have said that they found it. But what
I didn't find that distracting. This in the film itself, like when they showed that footage, I think that they released it at Comic-Con last year, and it was like a trailer of all first person climbing and swinging.
Yes, that was a little bit obscene.
I was like, if this is what it's going to be like, then they're definitely going down the wrong track.
Absolutely agree with that. But what I found that stuck with me, after the movie, an hour after the movie, you're still thinking about swinging, and kind of then you kind of hit on the emotional highs that stick with you, and then you figure out how the movie's aging with you. And for me, the piece the scene that I think about the most, that I find representative of this movie, is Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, and Gwen Stacy in the high school empty high school hallway, trying to ask each other out on a date.
Yeah, that was cute.
And I think for me, the single highest point of this film is Andrew Garfield's portrayal of Peter Parker. This is the Peter Parker that I feel like I grew up with. Mm-hmm. This is the awkward 17-year-old kid, and I think he nailed it in a way that Tobey Maguire did not. And I was having a conversation with another friend, my only other friend, who said, had this point that I didn't realize what I didn't like about Tobey Maguire's portrayal until I saw this. Like, something just always felt kind of off, kind of yellow about it, and now I know it was the awkward kid approach, and I think he just the stumbling through dinner at the Stacy house was terrific. It was terrific. Mm-hmm. I think he played the duality of Peter Parker and Spider-Man, better than I've seen, and that made the movie. I was a real high of the movie, and I think that's you mentioned 500 Days of Summer. I mean, that's the sort of character angle of this film that allows the actors and the people and the characters that they are portraying to balance out the spectacle, and I think this movie did it really well, surprisingly well for a reboot.
It did a great job, and I also really felt that they developed the relationship very properly between Peter or Spider-Man and the Lizard, and Peter and Dr. Connor, and that whole idea that Peter's not out to just get rid of the Lizard and try to kill him. He's trying to stop him and help him so that he can be better. And I thought that was just so well done. Like the scene where they're fighting in the high school, and all Peter or Spider-Man's trying to do is just stop him, because he knows that this is not Dr. Connor. And it's like that they nailed that so right. And that was one of my favorite relationships in the comic book was the Lizard and Spider-Man, and how Peter was never trying to just get rid of him. He's always just trying to stop him and get him treatment so that he can get better again.
Exactly.
So I was so happy to see that.
Well, in that scene when they're fighting in the high school, when he when he pulls Gwen to him and says, "I'm going to throw you out the window now." Like that was a perfectly executed rescue. I absolutely loved it. And my wife didn't see the movie with me. I took my kids, and so later we came home, and my kids were so excited about the bridge rescue. where all the cars are hanging from the bridge by the
right.
web, and he pulls Jack out of the car, and that moment hits such an emotional high in the movie when he says, put the mask on, Jack, it'll make you stronger. Like that, I'm watching my wife, who is typically not a fan of these movies, and she had goosebumps. I mean, she was just really moved by that. And I think that really, sets the bar for where they go with these next films. It'll be really interesting to see how they, how they make the leap across the sequel transom.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to see what they do with it, because the ending, the little tease at the end, left me.
Yeah. Who was that? Was that
a lot
Norman?
of questions as to who are they bringing into the next one. So
they have to. It seems, I don't know. I mean, how do you make a Spider-Man movie and not fully introduce Norman Osborn in some capacity?
I don't see. My theory. There's the fantastic Spider-Man series out there that involved Lizard. It involved Kraven the Hunter, and it involved Vermin. And Vermin is kind of in kind of the way that Lizard is kind of half man, half lizard. Vermin is kind of half man, half rat, and he lives in the sewers. And I got a hint from that end that maybe that's Vermin, and maybe what they're doing is they're making Vermin actually Peter Parker's father. He had done some experimentation with rats and trying to kind of do that mix, and he became Vermin and is now living in the sewers, and he's now coming in mental flashes to Dr. Connor while he's in prison, and maybe they're going to introduce that story with Kraven the Hunter. That's be really awesome. Interesting. My favorite Spider-Man story ever. So I don't know if they're going to, but who knows? It was a strange little tease, and it's hard to tell really what's going on.
It's interesting. The one other point on what they are taking from other Spider-Man sort of universes, right? The Spider-Man universe. What I found really interesting is they're not afraid to let him really get hurt. I don't think in the recent trilogy did we see him get shot. Did we see Spider-Man actually ever get shot?
I don't think he got shot, but he sure got hurt a lot.
He got beat up, but he didn't quite get. Well, okay, wait a minute. There was that bit at the end of. I guess he always gets his mask ripped, so he only has like one eye showing, and they did rip the mask.
Always gets halfway torn off, so you can tell that it is Tobey Maguire.
There's always something.
There, I guess.
It just felt like they weren't afraid to really to knock him around, and I loved. I thought I was going to really resent the fact that he was always taking his mask off, but I think it actually played really well. I think they got, seeing him get shot is a different, it's a different feeling than comic violence,
Yeah.
And so it leads me to sort of what they're doing with the ultimate comic Spider-Man, right? And the fact that Peter Parker is dead in this storyline and replaced by Miles Morales, a whole new Spider-Man kid, and so there's just so much story to go from, and I think that's one of those sort of the more we're going to take for granted the fact that there's a kid who climbs on walls, and we're going to we're going to dismiss the storylines where there's the island of spider people and then but we are going to introduce this sense of reality that here's a kid who can get hurt, and that changes the dramatic potential of the story, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So
great movie. I'm curious to see where they go from here.
Well, I'm very excited. Now I have some housekeeping. I have a segue to housekeeping.
Fantastic. Put your apron on.
My apron's already on.
Oh, sorry. I should have known. What was I thinking?
Just my apron and a smile. And so this coming Saturday, you're listening to this lovely podcast this Saturday. We're going to do our second in our, what would you call it? Historic late night movies.
Definitely.
The movies we like, late night movie clutch on Google Plus, on our Google Hangout, and so we'll be posting that and embedding that video on our webpage. at rashpixel.tv/MWL. And we will also post that on our, obviously it'll be on our YouTube page and on our Google Plus page if you are a Google Plus user, and it will be on our Facebook page. And that's the second bit of housekeeping. We have updated our Facebook. Formerly you could go to the Rash Pixel page and get updates about movies we like, but we have so many playable movies we like shows now that we went ahead and launched our very own Movies We Like Facebook page. So facebook.com/movies we like, and you will get to the podcast page for this show. So if you aren't interested in organizing or project management or dare I say marketing, you can just like that page and get only updates to the movie show, and we invite you to do that.
Fantastic. And
speaking of the Hangout, we do have, confirmed, we've got our friend Mike Evans. We've got our friend Steve Sarmento is going to be joining us.
Oh, good.
And we have our dear friend Chad Stoops, who says he's actually germane to our topic that night. He is going to wear his pissed off Robin costume. I don't know what that means, but the text he sent me was awesome. I'm going to wear my pissed off Robin costume to celebrate. We will, of course, be talking about the third and final Christopher Nolan Batman film, which launches into the world on Thursday night. And so we will see it, and we will talk about it on Saturday night at 9:30 Pacific. Or 9, maybe 8:30. What did I say? 8 or 9? Well, watch the pages. You'll have the update.
8:30?
8:30? I think 8:30 Pacific.
About, but yeah, watch the pages.
That's it. That's a story. Do I have anything? Did I miss anything?
Do we need to? Are we talking about where they find us now, or are we doing that later?
Oh God! Well, I think we covered it, right? Where are they? Except for you,
Smart Radio, and I don't know.
Except for you,
I get lost in all of that.
Well, go ahead and do your thing.
People can find me at sodacreekfilm.com or on Twitter at Soda Creek Film and Facebook.
Excellent.
Soda Creek Film and of course Rash Pixel.
Which is excellent. And rashpixel.tv for the show, /MWL. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes. We definitely appreciate it when you do that. And leave us comments and give us ratings, because that helps other people find us. It makes things more better. Believe that or not. Let's see. We also have completed the move to SoundCloud, and so if you're a SoundCloud user, you can go follow the set. Just look for Rash Pixel or search for Movies We Like. You can find it. All of the players on Facebook and everywhere around are the SoundCloud players, and so you can leave comments right in the stream. And please do that. When you are screaming, probably at me, you can leave a comment as such and just say, see what you can do to make a good scream when you find things are insane. As I'm sure that our friend Mike Evans is right now cataloging his list of hates, and he will begin talking about them on Saturday night. And I hope he will.
Steve Sarmento, please finish your yard work before you come back in to do SoundCloud and scream.
SoundCloud will hurt you. So that's where we are. We're pretty much everywhere, so you can wherever finer podcasts are cataloged, and that's it. So tonight, what are we talking about tonight, Andy?
Tonight is our build up to the Bourne Legacy, which opens in a few weeks. Tonight we're going to start the Bourne series with the Bourne Identity from 2002, Doug Liman's film.
Oh, I love this movie. I really do. And okay, so I don't know where to start. You sent some links and on Chaos Cinema.
Chaos Cinema, which we can start talking about tonight. I think that's definitely stuff that is going to be play in big in the Bourne trilogy. It's definitely going to play in a lot with the next two, the Bourne Supremacy and the Bourne Ultimatum. I think it's important to discuss, though, this Chaos Cinema theory that has kind of cropped up in the nature of the difference between this first one and then the next two.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I think this is the whole theory of Chaos Cinema sort of plays in with this movie, and at this point in filmmaking, kind of filmmaking history, what was going on in the transition to, making the transition to more seamless digital tools, I think really kind of makes that an interesting conversation to have. So we definitely have to talk about that.
Definitely.
First of all, let's talk about what this movie is. It's based on the book. The original was the book, the Bourne Identity by Robert Ludlum, which is
and I didn't realize this. Robert Ludlum didn't start writing novels until he was 40 years old. Did you know that?
This puts a lot of weight on 40, doesn't it, for you?
It does. I'm like, wow, I better get my first novel at the idea put together so I can start cranking it out when I hit 40.
Because this guy wrote a ton of books. Like, he wrote a lot of books, I think, right?
He wrote 21 books officially that are published around the world, starting from 1971. That was his first book. His last book was published in his lifetime, is published in the year 2000. And then, of course, now the name Robert Ludlum has basically been trademarked, and there have been quite a number of books that have been published posthumously under the trademark name Robert Ludlum, although, by a variety of authors.
Yeah.
People just love his type of books, though.
And he started at 40.
Yeah, I know. It's an amazing, I guess you could call it a second career. He actually started as an actor and worked in New York he tried kind of opening up his own little theater. And he was really struggling, and he had a wife and kids, and he talked to his buddy, James Caron, who's a fantastic actor, and a great guy. And he told him, he's just like, I can't do it. I can't keep this going. I just don't know what I'm going to do. There's no way I can keep going living like this, because I got to support my family. And that was the last James Caron heard of him for a number of years. And then he was walking around in a bookstore, and he saw him sitting there signing books for his first novel. And, he really kind of just decided to make a complete 180 in his life and made a huge career out of writing books. It's an amazing second career for this man.
Well, he has he really defined a contemporary espionage genre. Sort of political thriller. He's obviously sort of owns the genre.
He definitely does.
So many of his books are, they're classics from high school and college. They really sort of, I remember where I was when I was reading, specific points in his books, and the Bourne Identity is one of those legendary characters, Jason Bourne, and it's one that is fascinating for, I think, given the wild escapades that this character sort of gets himself into. Watching and reading along, and I think, to this discussion, watching Matt Damon play this character, watching him regain his life with each of these sort of episodes, each of these adventures, and each of these, whether it's a fight or some new discovery, watching him regain this piece of his memory, it makes this character really human and approachable. And I think that's one of the things for me that makes this movie so compelling to watch, is that it really is a very simple story and a very simple man in a very complex situation.
Yeah, he really is, and it is very interesting to watch Matt Damon as Jason Bourne go through this movie. You can tell that it's just, he's got retrograde amnesia, and he really is just searching for clues, trying to figure anything out. And as he starts gaining knowledge of things that just are so strange to him, like why do I have these strange fighting skills? Why am I paying attention to all the exits in this restaurant? Why do I know all the license plate numbers from the car, and I can tell who's going to be good in a fight in this place? It's a fascinating thing to explore. And I think one of the best moments in the movie is right at the beginning, actually, when he's on the boat after he's been rescued out of the ocean, and he's looking at himself in that dirty mirror and just looking at his reflection, and he's talking to himself, asking him questions. It's almost like he's interrogating himself in all these different foreign languages. Like he starts in French, and then he's in German, and he's asking himself questions, trying to give himself clues. And it's so interesting that he's looking at himself, and it's this interesting, this dirty reflection in this kind of rusty, dirty mirror. And so the image itself is kind of like just this faded, unclear image of this man who is talking in all these languages and has no idea who he is. It's really, really interesting.
It is interesting, and I think it's one of the things that makes the travelscape of this film work so well. And the way the movie is filmed, when you see, this kind of montage, I look at him, making the transition into Paris, and suddenly this character, Jason Bourne and Matt Damon, as they're waiting on the stairs, or waiting at the front door, and they're ringing the bell, and he looks totally out of place.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like this giant hole in the middle of the film, in the middle of the frame is this guy who's like a giant sore thumb, and then the woman of the house opens the door, and she says, she has that look of familiarity, and all of the sudden, kind of magically, all of the puzzle pieces of the frame come together, and he totally belongs as he starts speaking French, and he just sort of melds into the frame, and I find every transition, every sort of bit that he learns was just expertly written into the frame, and it makes his discovery of his own identity that much more powerful. Now, Liman and I think let's step back a little bit and talk about how this movie ended up getting made, because I think it's interesting. He really, when you compare the Bourne Identity book to the movie, they tossed out just about all of it.
It's really interesting when you read the synopsis of the story. It starts off kind of similar, and then
amnesiac guy
takes
got
a left
shot.
turn.
Yeah,
completely different.
So let's see. Do you want to you always do such a good job telling the story of how these things got written?
I don't have a ton of information about this one, other than the thing that I found most fascinating. Now, this is Doug Liman. He had been an independent filmmaker up to this point. This is a man who had started off in the mid-90s. His big film, his second film was his big one. It was Swingers, which came out in the mid-90s. It came out in 1995. And then he went on to do Go. And then all of a sudden, the Swingers was 96. And then all of a sudden, because of the success of these films, I mean, he's clearly going in the right direction. Essentially, he was knocking at Hollywood's door, and he was able to kind of have his pick. And The Bourne Identity is the movie that he really wanted to do. His father, actually, had worked in the NSA under President Reagan and had been involved in the investigation in the Iran-Contra affair. And because of that, he was very interested in this world of spies and all of that. And so this was the story that he really wanted to tell. He knew he was going to have to change some of it. I mean, that is one reason that a lot of it changed, is because these books definitely were dated. It was a lot more about, Jason Bourne had, I believe some of his problems had arisen when he was serving in the Vietnam War. And so they dropped a lot of that and made it modern. And in the process of that, they lost Carlos the Jackal, which was one of the major characters that got cut out of the story. But, Doug Liman really wanted to do this spy story. And so this is the story he developed. In the process of developing the story, they talked to quite a number of actors to play Jason Bourne. The strangest of which I thought was Sylvester Stallone, who seemed quite, unless he was going for it to be a later in life sort of story, it seemed pretty old to be playing Jason Bourne. I don't know. What did you think of that?
Well, of the idea of Stallone playing Bourne?
Yeah.
It seems like it would have been a vastly different film. And I I feel like
so Stallone would have been 56 years old making that movie.
56 years old. Yeah, it's just not the same. And I think there's a piece of it that you get a taste of in this first film, which we'll talk about in subsequent films over the coming weeks, which is there is this idea that the character has to be absolutely sort of vanilla. I mean, whoever plays this is powerfully trained kind of instrument. It's a tool of Treadstone, this government operation. And as such, the character has to be somebody who can walk into any situation and just be generic. And Sylvester Stallone is not that guy.
No, and Matt Damon, I think, was the perfect choice for this, because not saying that he's vanilla and generic, but he plays that very well. And he just seems like the everyman. Interestingly,
he is in Europe. Right? I mean, solid jaw, blonde, short hair. I mean, he's, right. You see Matt Damon's all over, walking all over the streets of Europe.
Definitely.
So, I think you're right. I think he was just the right choice for the part. There's somebody else. Who else am I missing? There wasn't just Stallone. Russell Crowe. That's the other one
that popped up. But he also felt too old to me. I mean, that would have been coming on the heels of, I believe it would have been Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. And it just seems like a kind of father figure sort of guy. It just didn't seem like, young spy running around and kicking butt. So,
well, and interesting kind of, Russell Crowe was kind of sowing his oats as a character actor between those two movies, right? Between Gladiator and A Beautiful Mind. Right, he was showing what he was capable of, and both of those movies I thought were really exceptional movies in their own right, and he did a great job in them. But again, he's a showpiece, boy, I think the contrast is that Matt Damon brought the sensitivity of the fact that this movie is not about the fights. The fights are punctuation on this story of the search for identity, and Sylvester Stallone. I feel like this movie would have been about the fights. That's the baggage that he brings. And
exactly, it would have turned it into an '80s action movie.
Yeah, and he was already on target for that. Who knew that? Just what was it? 7 years later we would have the Expendables.
Like 8 years later. That came out in 2010, right?
I don't even know. It feels like it's been out much longer. And I can say that because it feels like I've already forgotten about it.
You only say that because the next one's coming out soon.
I know. So, okay. So Matt Damon ended up bringing, I think, that sensibility to the film, and I think what do you think about Franca Potente?
I like the few Americans who saw Run Lola Run in theaters when it came out in '99, completely fell in love with her. I was just totally taken with her. She was so great in Run Lola Run.
Oh, she was terrific.
Such just a stellar movie, just nonstop adrenaline sort of movie, and I just loved it.
Nonstop, over and over again.
Crazy German film that is like the same story told in 3 different ways, as if you have 3 different possibilities, almost like a video game starting again and taking a different path. It was just a fascinating movie. I loved it.
You can always tell.
So excited when I saw her in this.
You can always tell cinema hipsters, because they either if they're women, you don't need to know much about them, but they show up at a party and they have bright red hair. They're cinema hipsters.
That's right.
Right.
That's definitely right.
The characteristic Lola hair.
And I'm a little sad that she just hasn't been in as much as I feel that she should have been after breaking out and Run Lola Run. And I guess that's something that happens with foreign actresses when they break into American cinema. They can either kind of have their 1 or 2 movies and then kind of disappear, kind of like Audrey Tautou from Amélie.
Yeah, there's another one who's just gone missing.
Well, yeah, and then and Franca Potente. I mean, she did the first 2 Bourne movies, and she did a few other ones. She did Blow, and she's definitely been in quite a bit. She was in The Shield. She was a lot of TV.
She did House and Psych, and
right.
She's done some British stuff.
But I would love to see her in more stuff. She deserves it.
Mm-hmm. Truly.
So,
but
yeah.
She's fantastic, and I think that it makes for an interesting relationship between the two of them. I think this sort of fish out of water kind of relationship. We're gonna, all of a sudden you're paying me $20,000 to be a driver.
The thing that I found most interesting about this film is this film came out the same year as I think one of the worst James Bond movies, Die Another Day. I mean, it was just not a great film, and the whole notion of what James Bond was, this suave guy who would get into these just elaborate fight sequences, all over the world, just have all these gorgeous women whenever he wanted. It almost was becoming just so over the top and ridiculous, unfortunately for Pierce Brosnan, I think he took the brunt of all the bad James Bond movies. I mean, he's got Goldeneye, I guess, but most of the rest of them aren't that good.
You know what, Goldeneye, okay, fine. But the video game for Super NES of Goldeneye was actually far more memorable than the movie.
But this came out the same year as I think the worst of them all, which is just Die Another Day. And I think it went to show that people were tired of that sort of James Bond movie. People were done seeing, I mean, the fight scenes are great, the action stuff's great, but they wanted more story to it. They wanted an actual relationship between the hero of your story and the woman in the story. And they wanted to see a story that actually, had some meat to it, not just this story that kind of pandered to you just so you could kind of jump from action scene to action scene. And I think it's interesting that after this movie and Die Another Day both came out that same year, they switched James Bond actors, and the next one that came out was 2006 with Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
And Casino Royale was one of the best James Bonds. It's like they took a lot of lessons from the way they were doing the Bourne series, because I feel that the relationship between Jason and Marie is just so heartfelt all the way through. Marie is never treated like just a woman that is dragged along with Jason Bourne's escapades. She was always treated as a real character, someone that we really got attached to. We saw her dealing with real emotions. Like, I think the way that she plays the scene when the first assassin crashes into Jason's former apartment,
the Paris apartment,
and they have that huge fight, and she's just completely. She's, literally going into shock. I mean, this guy just threw himself out the window at the end of the fight, and she's completely in shock. And everything was just done so realistically, and it was. I think America and the world was able to take a deep breath and go, oh, finally something that feels a little more realistic.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and it's something that I feel like if you look at the films of the time, this movie was sort of a harbinger of so many things to come. I mean, it showed not only was America, or the world, I should say, ready for a new kind of action hero. Right. We had grown tired of the Pierce Brosnan style of James Bond. And I would say, had you released like a Never Say Never Again, they'd a sort of a forked reboot of James Bond with Sean Connery, to attempt to, when they did that, it was an attempt to see, what are we ready for in this character? Can we do things a little bit differently? I don't think any of the historical sort of James Bonds would have been able to pull off a Die Another Day. We were ready for something really wholly different in our action hero, and I think what Jason Bourne delivered is this more sort of human, gritty, and downright sort of puzzled action hero that still showed a lot of strength and respect, and toward, like you said, strength and respect toward women. I think that relationship piece is really important. The fact that he gives her an untold number of opportunities to get out and solutions to separate herself, and yet she is, she sees the reality of the situation, which is, she's stuck. She's stuck because of choices she made before, not because she was forced into it, but because she said yes to the money, and now she has to see it through. And I think it allows her to find her strength again in a way that highlights the sort of specialness of that relationship, the uniqueness of that relationship that we don't get no matter no matter what we think of Halle Berry emerging from the ocean.
True. It's also nice. And actually, speaking to that, it is nice how at the same time, he does finally find a way to get her out of his life so that he can go on and finish this story. You know, he after the farmhouse sequence, he gets her out. She leaves with her friend, and he tells what's his name, Ward Abbott, that, you know, I killed her. She was slowing me down.
Right.
And it's a great way to, I mean, it's kind of a sad way where essentially he's having to say goodbye to the one person who really he was finally able to connect to. It's his only friend, like he said.
But you know what was so great about that is that the exit of Marie's exit was such a way that she was taking responsibility for something, right? It wasn't that he was just ditching her. It was that she had to go with him to get the you know, her ex-boyfriend or whatever out of the picture. Like that was an exit of responsibility. And I think integrity in sort of the drama of it, it could have been that he could have just shoveled her off and left her on a street corner. It could have been something with no respect. And I think we learn a lot about both characters, that she's willing to take responsibility to get these other people out of this picture, and he's willing to, and Jason is willing to let her go.
Yeah.
And it makes it harder because he's tried so hard to let go of her that by the time he actually has to let go of her, you can actually see no matter how cold he was trained to be, it's hard for them to separate.
Exactly.
And they play that really well.
They do. And it's a great story, and it really, we'll talk about this next time, but it really makes the opening of the Bourne Supremacy that much harder to watch.
Right. Okay. Shall we? Let's talk about how this was shot. What is unique about how this was shot? And maybe you want to use the car chase or through Paris.
Well, I'll just use the whole movie. I mean, the car chase through Paris, I think, is a very important sequence. I mean, it became known at the time as one of the best car chase sequences in a very long time. A lot of it because it was, you know, done with real stunt people driving on real streets, and it really had that feel going back to, you know, The French Connection or Bullet or even Ronin or something like that, where you actually really had a real car chase going on. The second unit director, Alexander Witt, mostly was in charge of doing the car chase scene, shot all over Paris. And it's a fantastic car chase scene. Watching this car scene, though, it really, and this is a good point to start discussing kind of this whole notion of chaos cinema and these other philosophies. There's a classic cinema, which is what people have been watching all the way, you know, up until recent time, really. You know, you watch an action sequence, and everything in it, while full of action, is built in such a way where the shots connect from one to the next, so the audience can understand all of the action that's happening. They can understand the spatial relationship between things, and they really get a sense of the environment that they're in. There was another philosophy that came out shortly after that. I'm trying to remember what it was called. I'm not going to remember, but it basically was a philosophy where they took that same style of filmmaking and essentially amped it up a little bit, where you're getting the same classical style of editing and shooting, but everything was a little, the shots were shorter. The camera moves were faster. Everything just really is intensified continuity. That's what it is, where everything is intensified. That became a way to energize a scene, I guess you could say. And now this new philosophy came out called chaos cinema. There's a great set of 3 videos that were this guy made, and I'm going to pull up the videos right now because I can't remember his name.
Matthias.
Matthias Stork.
Stork
Has them up on not what does he have them up on?
Pressing play.
Press play.
Press play.
Yeah, Press Play, which he released through IndieWire. So we'll put the links up for that so you guys can watch these essays. Now, a lot of people, it created quite a controversy when he released these video essays about chaos cinema back in, I believe it was in 2011. Where this has kind of become the modern style of action cinema, where you've got the shaky cam and you've got this editing style where it's so fast, the cuts are so fast, the shots are so tight on objects, and we're cutting from them and the camera's shaking so much that you really lose your sense of where you are in the scene, and you can't really tell. You can tell things are going on, but it just makes it that much more difficult to really piece things together. And he uses examples of Michael Bay and Paul Greengrass and a lot of modern action filmmakers as to how they use this style. And it creates this energy in the scene, but at the same time, the audience is starting to lose a sense of what is the actual story is. This film, The Bourne Identity, is not so much in the vein of the chaos cinema style of filmmaking. Much more, as I watched it again and I really looked at the fight scene. In fact, Mike Evans and I sat down and watched the Paris apartment fight scene, and then compared that with the apartment scene in Berlin, I believe, in the Bourne Supremacy, just to see the difference between the two. And it is a big difference between Doug Liman's style of directing, which is much more of a classic style, while it still has some steady cam, shaky cam sort of work in it. But then you put in Paul Greengrass's from the Bourne Supremacy, and it's so shaky. Now, I personally don't have a real problem with that, particularly on the small screen, but I do remember when I watched the Bourne Supremacy in theaters, I was a little seasick afterward. But
it's an interesting thing because you can see that the transition from intensified continuity to chaos cinema. What I guess is it safe to say that we've adopted the term, or should we still give credit to Matthias Stork?
I think we should still give credit to Matthias Stork. It's only been his theory for like this past year
for 8 months.
Yeah, and there's quite a bit of internet controversy. Honestly, regardless of what people's thoughts are of whether it has a place in cinema or if it's a bad move for cinema to be moving into or anything like that, I think that the philosophy and the theory and the idea of it is still sound. And I still say, oh, sure, why not call it chaos cinema? It works. It makes sense. I think it can be used effectively, and I think it can also be used poorly, just like classic cinema, just like intensified continuity.
Well, and that's why I think this movie is actually a really good example of the transition and what intensified continuity really allows you to do with an action film. You don't actually lose your place in this movie, right? In Bourne Identity. Yeah, I don't find in the fight, even in the fight scene, which I think the fight scenes in this movie are like we talked about the transition from Bond to the modern Bond era. The stunt fights in this film were absolutely terrific. I mean, they were exemplary. And shooting those fight scenes, the sort of level of intimacy that you get, feeling like you are in the fight, like you really are, you are in the fight. When Jason Bourne is going at the guy with the big pen, that is an cringe-inducing, painful kind of experience because it is so intimate. But that, I think, is a great example of that intensified continuity. It's not so. It still puts a level of weight, of accountability on the actors being able to really perform this fight.
Exactly.
Right. And I think the transition, my argument really is, I think what Matthias actually hints at is the fact that technology has really been, rather than sort of a cultural shift toward chaos cinema, it's the technology that has allowed us to experiment and get to the point where we have so much shaky cam, because, now we can do things with our film that we've never been able to do thanks to this sort of nonlinear, editing. And if you watch the development of the nonlinear platform from Walter Murch in 1996, editing The English Patient on Avid, to The Matrix, to, the Coen brothers, to Bond, you see, as good as these platforms are getting, the pacing of the shots is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So
yeah, and it, in fact, there's an interesting website which I just discovered called Cinemetrics.
Yeah, you actually totally get lost in that.
It's for real serious statistical film geeks, I guess. You can type in the name of a movie or a director or a lot of different things, and it will pull it up, and you can look and see, like, for example, the Bourne Identity. I can see what the average shot length is, and in here it says the average shot length in the Bourne Identity is 3.6 seconds, compared with the Bourne Supremacy at 2.4 seconds and the Bourne Ultimatum at 2.8 seconds. Although somebody else has the Bourne Ultimatum here at 1.7 seconds. Whatever it is,
it's dramatically different from this film.
They're definitely right, exactly, and a lot less shaky. So it's very interesting to see how that develops and what. I guess, as we mature as film viewers and the filmmakers mature, what becomes effective use of these tools and what becomes kind of like sloppy or just improper uses of these tools.
Because what we get with Bourne Identity is, I think, a really smart use of the tools. And it'll be interesting to see, because I haven't watched the other two movies in a couple of years, and it'll be interesting to see kind of how those have aged too. But this one, you can see using quick cuts to increase the level of emotional intensity in the film. Whether it's an action scene or a chase scene, whatever the case is, you use quick cuts to increase the emotional intensity of the film, and you use longer and slower cuts to evoke a different emotion. And this movie is sort of paced that way. And when you look at Cinemetrics, you can kind of see a very smooth curve, scene by scene, with the longer shots and the shorter shots. It ends up being kind of a lovely sine curve. And I think this movie you feel that as you're watching the film, as opposed to, I think when we look at, say Tony Scott, look at,
like Domino, I think.
Domino, yeah, is a great example of just insanity. Yeah. And is that just another sign that, in fact, we are all sort of meth addicts when it comes to cinema? And if we want to get excited about a movie, we can't do it in a movie that is paced historically. We now have to just turn everything up to 11. Every sequence has to be turned up to 11 because we don't know how to feel anymore.
Right.
I look at
what that does then in 10 years' time. All of a sudden, what we thought was 11 is now a 4, and we have to amp it up some more. Right. It's the never-ending cycle.
There was there are a couple of movies that, and I know I'm getting totally off topic, but there are a couple of movies that stick out to me as seminal in these transitions. And the first one was Ralph Fiennes. He did the one where you put the glasses on. What was that one called?
Strange Days.
Strange Days blew me away. That was such an uncomfortable film to watch. And then the first movie that I saw where there was actually a warning walking in saying this film has been edited and mastered extremely loud. Don't bring children was Twister.
Oh yeah, right. I forgot about that little warning they had.
Right, and that was another one where you see that this, these two movies are movies that use, in the case of Strange Days, use sort of visuals and Twister to use kind of the emotion that comes with quick cutting audio and incredibly, sort of loud audio to push the genre forward. And from that point, from each of those movies, you can sort of trace the kind of the fruits of those films, over the subsequent decades in terms of pacing and mixing.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
well, and a lot of that, not so much. Well, even in this film, I mean, that nature of that intensified continuity, or even the chaos cinema theory, comes from the idea that, okay, if you're really in a fight scene, everything is moving that much faster. Your head's whipping around a lot faster, and it creates that almost a documentary style feel to it, where you're actually, you're not just this Alfred Hitchcock as God, as director person standing in the back with the camera filming a scene happen in front of you. You're actually in the scene, and very much like a documentary, like the camera is literally like a part of the fight. And it is a very interesting school of thought as to how you can create an action scene and make it much more intense by essentially involving the filmmakers in the fight rather than having them observing from the back. It's just, it does, I mean, you talk to a lot of people. I don't ever really mind the shaky cam. It never bothers me that much. But there are people out there that I know who, if a shaky cam fight scene comes up, they'll literally will have to just close their eyes, wait for it to end, because it just makes them nauseated.
Yeah. Yeah, you can feel it. You can feel it, certainly feel it coming. And I think as cameras get smaller and smaller and the editing tools get faster and faster and more precise, I think we're only going to see more of it.
Well, especially because as the cameras get smaller, as the editing tools get simpler, as things get cheaper, you're going to end up with a lot of filmmakers who aren't as skilled at using these tools, and are going to be using them in ways that are very just not schooled. And it's going to feel very amateurish, and it is just going to be very poorly done.
Well, and you can almost feel the next transition, which is less shaky cam than, and I think probably an elegant use of it is extremely, and what is it even called? Extremely high frame rate slow motion, right? Mm-hmm. Where you have the Hurt Locker, for example, the first explosion of the Hurt Locker, when you see the earth actually move and the rocks, the sand actually sort of levitate. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the next generation of shaky cam, right? Where we, kind of inspired by the Matrix, and now we have these incredibly high frame rate cameras that are hitting more or less the mass market. And now you're able to do stuff and test stuff and push boundaries of action sequences in new ways. And like you say, it's going to be amateur. And then, there will be folks like, what's her name? Catherine Bigelow, right. Who use it really artfully and beautifully. And it can be done, and to create really powerful moving image.
And I'm totally fine if we end up with more Bourne series as opposed to more Die Another Days.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting, because then we end up with Casino Royale, which is one of my absolute favorites, and then Quantum of Solace, which was not as much. Mm-hmm. And there are, obviously, we've talked about that there were a lot of extenuating circumstances, the writer's strike and things like that. But the in terms of the filmmaking effect of those two movies, I think I would be totally okay with a lot more of those movies. I think they're fantastic in terms of the way they were made,
cinema or not.
Yeah,
they're great movies.
Yeah. One of the most interesting pieces of that, which I think is always a great exercise, is Matthias Stork in his, I can't remember if it's the second, I think it was the second. Part 2 of his Chaos Cinema video essay, where he makes the case that what makes Chaos Cinema work, when it does work, is extremely meticulous audio. And audio that actually, an audio track that actually takes you through the scene, because what you can't, it's the idea that audio and video have to work together in concert with one another in order to give the whole film experience. And he separates the chase scene in Quantum of Solace, the opening chase scene, where what you see, without the audio track, and then what you hear without the video track, and it makes a remarkably kind of powerful point, and I think proves his point in at least in that case. So maybe we got off topic there a little bit, but.
Well, but it's very interesting in the nature of action films, how all of this is going to tie into. I mean, it's all going to come down to the Doug Liman, a little more, I'd say the classical cinema style, maybe the intensified continuity style of action filmmaking versus the chaos cinema style of action filmmaking, and it'll be interesting to see how the future of action filmmaking goes from here.
Yeah, interesting to note, I would say The Amazing Spider-Man was more akin to Doug Liman than it was to, Chaos.
Yeah, I would agree. I can't think of that many moments where it felt like we were using shaky cam.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe by the nature of swinging on a web, we're, kind of creating smoother shots.
Well, I was about to make the case that when you're using that sort of scale of CG effects, but then Michael Bay comes into play.
Well, and maybe
Transformers
3D
was a
plays
mess.
Into that. I don't know, but I can imagine shaky cam in 3D really probably would make a lot of people sick.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the performance of the movie, how it did. I actually have a quote.
The budget, 60 million. It did go over budget. This is something I guess we can mention. There were a lot of problems in the production of this. They went about 8 million over budget. They were supposed to release it actually September in 2001. Not a great movie or a great month to release a movie like this. It ended up getting pushed back to the following summer due to reshoots, rewrites. There were a lot of problems of Doug Liman and his independent style of filmmaking with the studio. They just didn't click very well. There were some scenes that he and Matt Damon really wanted to be kept in, particularly the farmhouse scene, which I love. I guess it actually got rewritten quite a number of times because the studio wanted to just cut it out completely. They felt it slowed the movie down. But then after September 11th, the studio felt strangely that, a lot of this action stuff, we're never going to be it's strange listening to Frank Marshall talking about the nature of film after September 11th. And he's just like, we're never going to be able to show an explosion in a movie again. And the way that incident affected the filmmaking community and what they were thinking was going to be the way they could tell stories after this. They literally felt like we're not going to be able to show anything blow up. They had this whole new ending rewritten that they were going to do, and they decided not to do it, and they just kept it in the Paris scene, or in the Paris Treadstone building at the end of the film. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, because of September 11th, they ended up rewriting a lot of the different elements of the film, trying to figure out different ways to make it. And they wrote a whole new ending and a new beginning, and ended up deciding to just cut them anyway because they didn't work out very well. It was this whole flashback scene where the movie actually was going to start with Jason Bourne in Greece looking for Marie. And then he has a spell, he has this spell and collapses. He essentially then flashes back to the entire rest of the movie. And at the end, he wakes up, he's in a bed, and Ward, played by Brian Cox, is standing over him, essentially saying, "We want you back in the fold. Let us know when you're ready. We'll be waiting," essentially. And then he goes off and finds Marie. Very strange open and close that you can watch on the DVD. I don't think they worked at all, and I'm very glad that they did not include them.
Well, I should say personally that I don't feel like I have ever, in watching the movie again, I remember being just shocked and awed by Jason Bourne's escape from Treadstone.
Yeah.
In that final scene, when he pushes the body through the stairs and falls 8 stories
riding the body.
riding the body down the center column of the stairwell and shooting all the way down. That was that was awesome.
Yeah, and then the nice little twist, which I mean, I can't remember if I saw it coming when I first saw it, but the nice little twist that the CIA was not, after this whole mess happened, they were not, in fact, anymore trying to kill Jason Bourne, but who they were actually killing at the end was Conklin.
Right, right.
Wonderfully played.
Wonderfully played. We didn't talk about it at all. I mean, we've talked about Chris Cooper before, but
adaptation. Fantastic actor. I mean, when does he do wrong?
No, he really doesn't. And this is one of those movies where he played. He was a piece of the puzzle, and he didn't overplay it. He didn't underplay it. He was he played. He was the foil that he needed to be in order for Jason to tell his story.
Yeah,
he was great.
Yeah,
I want to.
Fantastic.
We got to go to the Ebert. I just to wrap up a little bit. I'm interested in your take on this, particularly the last line of his review. So I'm just going to read the paragraph. Starts. I kind of enjoyed the Bourne Identity. I had to put my mind on hold, but I was able to. I'm less disturbed by action movies like this, which are frankly about nothing, than by action movies like Wind Talkers, which pretend to be about something and then cop out. Doug Liman, the director of Bourne, directs the traffic well, gets a nice wintry look from his locations, absorbs us with the movie's spycraft, and uses Damon's ability to be focused and sincere. The movie is unnecessary, but not unskilled.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's like saying, Die Hard is unnecessary. I mean, you're right. I mean, most movies are unnecessary, but I don't know. I don't really know where he's going with that.
This is one of those where sometimes the Ebert lets me down.
Yeah, he does some strange reviews sometimes. I'm not.
I mean, what kind of I kind of enjoyed the Bourne Identity.
Yeah.
Kinda. I was really, I found myself really moved by that last line. The movie was unnecessary, but not unskilled. If it was, in fact, skilled, wasn't it at some level necessary? That's my take.
Well, yeah, it's a strange review. I mean, what does it mean to have a movie be unnecessary? It's a form of art or entertainment. If it's entertaining, then sure, you can say entertainment is not necessary. But at the same time, we all need to take a break from things, and taking a breath and enjoying ourselves, I think, is very necessary. And if you put it up between this and Die Another Day, I certainly would think that
that was unnecessary,
ended up being a lot more unnecessary, actually, and unskilled than this.
Yeah. Well, this is, for me, the bottom line, this movie is it adds to the gestalt of the espionage thriller. It adds to the to the canon, and does not detract from it. And I think in that way, it really is a terrific film. It's artfully paced, and it doesn't oversell. And the tale of his rediscovery is humane and approachable, and it makes the action that much more appropriate punctuation.
Just to throw it in there, Ebert actually gave Die Another Day 3 stars, just as he did The Bourne Identity. I find that a little strange. Although he does say Die Another Day is still utterly absurd from one end to the other, of course, but in a slightly more understated way, and so it goes. Bond after Bond is the most durable series in movie history. Heads for the half century. There is no reason to believe this franchise will ever die. I suppose that is a blessing.
He also gave The Dictator 3 stars. Oh, and Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
So anyway, let's just close that review up.
So we're going to pick up. Do we have anything to add? I don't want to cut you off. To Doug Liman's
I never finished the numbers. I started and then I went off. So it did well. It 60 million, 8 million over budget, but domestically it ended up making 121 million. Internationally, another almost 92 million. So worldwide, about 213 million. Plus, probably it's about 151 million just on the first initial home video release. So, I mean, it definitely was something that they decided was definitely going to be one of their tent poles and going to be one of their big franchises that they were going to turn out with this. So that's so those are the numbers. So it was great seeing some of my favorite TV people in this. Walton Goggins from The Shield showed up as one of the techs working for Treadstone. I love The Shield, and Shane in The Shield, just one of the best TV characters ever. So anytime I see Walton Goggins, it makes me happy. And then I still don't know how to say this guy's name, but Adewale Akinoye Agbaje, something like that. That's my best guess. From Lost, Mr. Echo.
Oh, the Simon Adebisi from Oz. You didn't watch Oz, huh?
I didn't watch Oz, no, but
he was
Mr. Echo and here he was playing Wombosi, so it was thrilling to see him. And of course, the lovely Julia Stiles, who does manage to show up in all 3 films. So I think she's great. I don't think she works enough. I think she should start getting more roles, but I absolutely love her in the Bourne movies.
Oh, she's so great.
Yeah, she is great. And her character is a really interesting one, and it'll be nice to talk about her over the next 2 films after this, and how her role changes and becomes more predominant by the time we get to the end.
You know, I want to add just my excitement about Adewale Akinoye Agbaje. There's rumor that he might play Black Panther.
In
Black Panther. Are you not up on the Black Panther? It's another Marvel guy.
Oh my goodness.
He's one of the Avengers. Actually, in the comic lore.
Really? That's very interesting.
Along with, we didn't even talk about more gossip from Comic-Con. Edgar Wright is doing Ant-Man.
I know. I was like, when's he going to finish the 3 Flavors Cornetto trilogy?
Well, I think that's first.
I think Ant-Man's first.
You think Ant-Man's
first?
Damn. Okay. Well, anyway.
I heard that they already have done some test footage for it, so.
Well, I can't wait for either one of them. I do want them both to come. Okay, so I'm sorry, I completely sidetracked you on that, but I was very excited about.
No, that is very
prospect
exciting.
of a Black Panther and an Ant-Man and the 3 Flavors Cornetto wrap up and Julia Stiles. I'm excited about all of those things, all 4 of those things.
Here.
And of this movie. It was this is a great movie and an awesome talk. So in wrap up, go see. It comes out. I think in some parts of the world. Can you see it already? The Dark Knight Rises.
Well, considering that this is released on Friday and it came out last night on Thursday,
then yes, you should have. So you should have gone to see it already. Dark Knight Rises in theaters now. Now wait a minute. Should people see it in 3D or is this a conversion? Or is it even related?
There's no 3D.
There is no 3D
Nolan,
on this one.
I actually just read something today. Christopher Nolan, Roger Ebert posted on Facebook a quote from Christopher Nolan saying, anyone I've talked to about 3D says that they don't like it. So he's decided he's not going to do any 3D movies.
That's good. I actually like that because it's just, the big movies like this one I'm going to see in the theater anyway. I don't need to see. I get it.
But this one is definitely one. I mean, they actually did shoot IMAX. Good chunks of this with the actual IMAX cameras. So if you are able to go see it at an actual IMAX theater, do so. If you don't have that option, go to a LIMAX theater and see it there. And then if you don't have that option, just you might as well just get a crummy pirated copy and just watch it that way because.
And sit alone in your house under a desk.
Sit alone
in the dark.
Pint of Bunny Tracks ice cream.
Yeah. So the IMAX thing, the last one, I find myself really annoyed with IMAX because the last one was really annoying with IMAX because I hate the switch. You know the switch? You think the whole movie's in IMAX.
I don't even notice the switch though. You actually notice the switch because it's invisible for me.
Oh no, I totally see the switch. Because the screen size changes. The screen changes.
It does, but if you're into the story, you're not going to be noticing.
I'm not that into the story. I'm never that into the story. It's like somebody comes in and puts glasses on with me and then takes them off again. And now I can see the rest of the... forget it. All right, so go see it at your fancy IMAX. Go to a museum and see the Batman movie.
There you go.
All right. So we'll see. All of you good people will be on Google Plus on Saturday night. Please join us for our late night movie clutch. Go like the new page on Facebook and the Movies We Like page, and you can catch up on all of our old episodes and find us on Twitter, all that good stuff. Thanks, Andy.
Fantastic. We will we'll be chatting soon.
Indeed.
About the bat.
We wanted to take a moment to thank you for your continued support over the years. It's hard to believe that we've been having weekly, in-depth discussions about movies since 2011.
That's right, 12 years and counting. Producing this show is a labor of love for us, but it does require a lot of time and effort each week.
If you enjoy our podcast and would love to help keep it going, there are some easy ways you can show your support. One is by using our Originals page to shop for the original source material that movies we've discussed were based on.
That's right. In Season 1 alone, we covered 13 films adapted from books or plays, from Charlie Kaufman's adaptation to David Fincher adaptations like Fight Club.
In Season 2, we covered even more, like Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes and The African Queen from our series about legendary cinematographer Jack Cardiff.
We can't forget about the 4 Jason Bourne movies we talked about. Love those movies. Well, the original trilogy, at least.
For our Richard D. Zanuck series, we did Jaws, Rush, Big Fish, and more. And for our horror series, we talked about John Carpenter's The Thing, which was adapted from Who Goes There?
We did our first great car chase series with movies like Bullet, The French Connection, and Drive. And for the holidays, we did Preston Sturgis's Christmas in July.
We had a great John Huston series with adaptations like The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
And for our baseball series, Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Have I told you lately how much I love that movie?
Yeah, I think you have. Plus, our Magician series and Heist film series had adaptations as well.
Tons of page-to-screen gems. Listeners can find the details and links to the original material at thenextreel.com/originals. Every book, play, or movie you buy through our links helps support the show, and it's no extra cost to you.
So dive in and get your next read today. thenextreel.com/originals has all the films adapted from other sources that not only we have covered, but all of the shows on the Next Reel family of podcasts. Check it out and get reading.
Support the show and build your reading list. It's a win-win. Head to thenextreel.com/originals.